It is really a pleasure to be here with the Center for Security Policy. Of course, the last time I spoke here was September of 2009, and we talked about how things were going in Afghanistan because I had recently returned. And, of course, a lot of things that I think we talked about have come to fruition over there. What they kind of wanted me to discuss today, very briefly, is how does your economy tie into your national security? Because I think that that's one of the very important things that we must understand. And even when you heard the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral Mullen, say that our debt that we have right now is our probably #1 national security threat. And for us to understand that helps us to understand what we're trying to frame up here. Because I believe if we do not get an effective and efficient constitutionally mandated government, if we don't reduce the size and scope of the federal government to get it back to understand what its priorities really are, then we're going to find ourselves in an even deeper trouble. But I think that what you find out happening now is that you're up against such an ideological chasm in the United States of America, where you are confronted with people that believe the more victims we can create, the more people we make dependent upon government, that is the means by which we can consolidate control and power here in Washington, D.C. Because as you get more people tied to government by a subsistence check or employment check, then we're going to find ourselves in a national security situation, which I'd like to go into in a little detail. When you think about the deficits that we have had over the past 3 years, 1.42 trillion, 1.29 trillion, now on the record for 1.65 trillion. The fact in the month of February, shortest month of the year, $223 billion deficit spending month, the largest we've ever had in the history of this country. We're spending about $4 billion a day. These are astronomical numbers that we must come to understand. But what it also lets you know is that it has an effect on your national security and your foreign policy. When you recognize the fact that 47% of our debt is held by foreign nations and 29% is held by China. Now, why does that mean anything when you look at China with the debt that they hold? Because that is a leverage point. Because when you think about what had happened last year over in the Korean Peninsula, I don't care what anyone says, I was stationed there in 1995, you were at a state of war in the Korean Peninsula. North Korea sunk a South Korean naval vessel, killing 47 sailors. North Korea shot 200 rounds of artillery into South Korea. Now, having spent a few days in the military as an artillery officer, I can tell you 2 rounds is a mistake. 200 rounds is a deliberate artillery preparation. But yet, what were we able to do? We were not able to do that very much because North Korea feels that since China is its greatest benefactor and they have this debt that they so well own over us, that our foreign policy is affected. And when you also look at the trade imbalance that is occurring between the United States of America and China, the most important thing that China recognized with the collapse of the Soviet Union is this: we did not defeat the Soviet Union militarily. We defeated the Soviet Union economically. So now you have a country such as China, which is still a communist country, that realizes that this is how you defeat the West, this is how you defeat the United States of America. You first do it economically. You understand that we are such a glutton for cheap goods. We have a problem down in South Florida with Chinese drywall. They're more than happy to send these things over here to us. But what does that end up create? This huge trade imbalance, this huge trade surplus that they have. And what does that go toward? It goes toward a subsequent military defeat. Because what they're doing, they're not taking that money and they're using it for the betterment of the Chinese citizen and their standard of living. The world's largest blue water navy will soon fly under a Chinese flag. Now, I'm going to say something that's going to make my dear colleague from the United States Navy, Chip Cravack, very happy. The world's surface is 70% ocean. The means by which a nation projects its strength and it projects its power is not through a large army. It's through a large navy. It's through a capable naval and maritime force. And you can look all the way back to the Phoenicians, to the Romans, to the Athenians, because the Athenians were the ones that were stronger than the Spartans, because the Spartans did not know how to command the seas. You can look at the early days of the Portuguese, of the Spaniards, of the Dutch, of the English, and then you look at America. But the problem is this. Back in 1990, the United States of America had 546 naval war vessels. Today, the United States of America has 283 naval war vessels. You have a threat there in that hemisphere in the Pacific, but you also have a threat here. Because of this trade imbalance, China, who now controls the Panama Canal, a Panama Canal which will expand in 2014 to bring in larger cruise ships. One of the big ports in the United States of America that has direct impact and trade with Latin America is Port Everglades. Sits in my district. $98 billion of revenue came into Port Everglades last year. But what is the economic threat that we could see coming to Port Everglades? Because 50 miles away, China's already building a port facility in the Bahamas. That's how your economy, that's how your debt and your deficit ties back to your foreign policy, your trade policy, ties back to your military development that you are enabling the Chinese to have. The second thing I think we must realize, energy independence is a national security issue. You know, it's personal for me because I remember the last time we had the Saudi oil embargo and we had the even and odd days based upon your last number of your tag. When those hot Georgia sunny days, you know, my dad did not sit in that 66 Lincoln Continental. He made me sit in it. So I remember what that was like. But yet we created an agency here at the federal government called the Department of Energy. The Department of Energy has one mission: to make the United States of America energy independent. I don't think so. But see, remember what I talked about, reducing the size and the scope of the federal government, getting it back to having a constitutionally mandated, a functioning federal government. And we don't have that right now when you look at an agency like that, which has let us down. Energy independence is a national security issue. Because I've been on that battlefield over there for 43, 44 months, and I can tell you that the money that we will not develop here for our own energy resources, the full spectrum development of our energy resources, we're sending to people that don't like us. OPEC is nothing but a collection of despots, dictators, autocrats, and theocrats. And if we don't recognize that, the fact that what they're doing is strangling this country, if we don't recognize that in the 21st century battlefield, energy resourcing is a leverage point. All you have to do is look at the invasion that Russia did into Georgia and the fact that you did not get a lot of condemnation out of European nations because of a simple little pipeline, natural gas pipeline, that feeds into Europe. And as these countries such as Russia and China are all over the world developing and seeking new energy resources, as these countries such as Venezuela continue to strangle us and making us wedded to them, then we're going to find ourselves in a very serious situation as far as our national security, because we are strengthening our enemies. It is part of our economy. It is part of getting Americans back to work. It is part of turning this economic ship of state around, is our energy independence, and we must get to it. The last point I want to bring up as far as national security, everyone must understand there are three levels of operations. There's the strategic level, there's the operational level, there's the tactical level. And one of the problems that I see us having, you never defeat the United States of America at the tactical level. You can go back and study Vietnam. You will see that we won every single tactical engagement. We won Tet, but we lost Tet at the strategic level. We lost Tet because we could not get the information operations machine going on. Their propaganda ended up being better than our propaganda. You can read the memoirs of General von Jopp, and he will tell you that you had us on our heels. But when we all of a sudden saw your media portraying Tet as a loss for you, you gave us hope. We must understand that in this new 21st century battlefield, the strategic objectives are so important. The number one thing is we must deny the enemy sanctuaries. How interesting it was that just this past week, we heard Pakistan say, we're not going to allow you to fly drone attacks anymore. See, we must come to the understanding that the enemy that we're up against, this non-state, non-uniform belligerent that does not respect borders or boundaries, we have to take the fight to him. And the most important thing that we must recognize is that you cannot continue down the path of a nation-building occupation style of warfare, because that drains your economic resources. Even more so, that makes the men and women that we send to defend this nation targets on some of these large static bases, which only has one or two roads by which you can exit those bases. We must get back to a point of understanding the greatest asset that we have as a nation when it comes to our military is our strategic mobility. Coming back to our maritime forces, we must understand that this enemy is going to seek to establish himself in what he believes are going to be very difficult places. But if you look at what is happening right now since the 1st of January, and I have to tell you that the world that we knew on the 1st of January is already totally different. We don't know where it's going to go by the end of this year. As I talked to Carolyn Glick yesterday in my office, there's a clock that's ticking. We got about 18 or 19 months because there's a window of opportunity that our adversaries see because we're economically weak. We have an incredible deficiency in leadership in this country, and we have a deficiency when it comes to strategic vision. Every one of those countries, when you look across North Africa and what's happening in the Middle East, they share one common thing, and that's the littorals. And if we're going to be successful as we move forward, understanding our economic strength and how it's tied to our national security, we must build up a force that is able to use that strategic mobility to quickly get to these difficult places and launch our forces to deny that enemy sanctuary. We must be able to cut off his flow of men, materiel, and economic support. We must win the information operations war, and we need to be able to cordon him off to reduce his sphere of influence all across the world. And that includes right here in the United States of America. So that's how I see the economic situation that we're in having a very adverse effect on our national security. This is a race. It's a race that we're in domestically because of this ideological chasm that has evidenced itself, but it's also a race that affects the future of liberty-loving, freedom-loving nations and people, and indeed Western civilization. So God bless you all for having me here, and thank you so much. Sure.
We have time for one or two very short questions.
Let's take three.
Three, fantastic. Yes. Just state who you are.
Congressman Noah Silverman, Republican Jewish Coalition.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
You alluded to the deficit of leadership, and as we all know, at least for the next year and a half and then some, the executive branch leadership is going to stay the same. And when it comes to the common defense and our well-being as a nation, our allies, we are going to be stuck with that leadership. The question that I wanted to hear your thoughts on is, what can Congress do given the constitutional constraints and the limits of that influence?
Well, I think the most important thing to realize is the House of Representatives is the people's house, and the most important thing we can resurrect is the sense of congressional inquiry called hearings. And we need to be able to call people up before that body of politic and ask them the hard questions so that it can be evidence what is happening. I think another thing is, members of Congress, we need to be writing letters. I already sent a letter over to Susan Rice because I see what's coming down the road with this potential United Nations unilateral recognition of a Palestinian state, which is nothing more than the recognition of a terrorist state. So until they rectify that Islamic terrorist situation, there should not be a recognition of Palestine. And the other thing is, you really kind of go back in history and understand that the whole word, the term Palestinia, was brought about by, Roman Emperor Hadrian in the year 73 AD after they conquered Judea, and they just changed the name. It has nothing to do with Arabic people. So if you really want to return the land to the original Palestinians, it's the Jewish people. But that's part of the information, platform that you must be able to dominate. My dear friend Ken Timmerman, you didn't hear that.
Alan, hi, how are you? It's
Great, sir.
Pleasure to see you here. Question about Iran.
I forgot to mention those cheeky fellows.
Well, a large question, a small question, or detailed question. Large question, the Iranians, there's a new propaganda film out. The Iranians are revealing their belief that they've reached an end-time scenario. The 12th Imam is going to come back, and they will lead the armies of the Muslim world against Israel.
The apocalyptic event.
Exactly. They are now saying this openly. Have you seen the film? Have you...
Iranian?
It's not Iranian. This is actually another one.
No, I have not seen theirs. But it comes back to, if you are involved with national security and you have never read The Art of War by Sun Tzu, shame on you. Because if you don't understand the thing about to know your enemy, to know yourself, and to know the environment and countless amounts of battles, you will always be successful. We, for whatever reason, have a recalcitrance of recognizing this adversary, this enemy, and understanding the principles upon which they stand. It is about the return of this hidden imam, the Mahdi. It is about creating an apocalyptic event, which brings about, their great armies coming together. And that's why, when you look at what's happening, this is a breakdown of all the borders and boundaries that they've been upset about since, the British, divided up the Arab world. So they want to come back to the old Ottoman Empire to have this big Islamic caliphate. And of course, Iran sees itself as being the Islamic hegemonic power.
Right.
Mutually assured destruction. That theory that we had with the Soviet Union is out the window. And we must recognize that. But once again, it comes to people that are, have the courage to recognize who the enemy is. I don't know. I got to tell you something. If a guy tells me that he wants to kick my butt, I'm not going to wait for him to, pick up his foot.
Right. Here's a specific question. The Obama administration, when they first came in February of 2009, put the most significant, best organized Iranian opposition party, the Free Life Party of Iranian Kurdistan, PAJAK, on the Treasury Department's terrorism list. This was clearly aimed at, it was part of Obama's outreach to the Iranian regime. The group is still on the Treasury Department's terrorism list. I have just gotten back from their camps in northern Iraq. These guys are pro-American. They are anti-Islamist. They would like to see a united Iran that's free of the mullahs. And we are essentially preventing them from being part of the Green Movement. Their people are the ones who are dying as leaders of the Green Movement. Is there something that Congress can do?
Well, there's already a letter being circulated, so we're already ahead of you. See, I told you, we do something every now and then.
Do we have?
But
maybe,
I think one of the things that we must recognize, when I heard the whole justification of going into Libya was to protect innocent civilians, I don't understand why 18 months prior to that, Iran did not meet that criteria.
Exactly.
And this is a big concern when you look at what has happened in Libya and also Egypt. Muslim Brotherhood is behind all of this. But they have effectively used propaganda. Just think about all of those protest signs that you saw in Egypt, pretty good English. You think about the people that they were interviewing on the street, pretty good English. Who do you think they were marketing that to? And then we come into Libya. We don't know who the rebels are. We're starting to find out now that some of these rebels have fought against our troops in Iraq and Afghanistan. Some of them have been released from Guantanamo Bay. But yet what they were able to do in Libya was to co-opt us and make us complicit into something. So now we contracted out our Navy and Air Force to a bunch of folks we have no idea who they are. That's why I'm really concerned about the next 18 to 19 months.
I'm going to take the chair's prerogative here briefly. And just yesterday, Patrick Poole broke a story that the Obama Department of Justice appears to have stymied prosecution of CARE and other Muslim Brotherhood groups following the Holy Land Foundation trial. Any suggestions?